She moves not with force but with gravity, silent, deep, and unseen, like the moon's pull on the tide. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather not to expose but to unveil, not to shame but to understand. In the shadowy corridors of power, strategy, and seduction, there lies an unspoken manuscript, 10 hidden frailties that women, perhaps, would rather remain cloaked. But let us be precise. These are not defects of character. They are veiled strategies, psychic postures, born from centuries of adaptation in a world too quick to dominate what it does not understand. The illusion of indecision. What appears as hesitation is often a test, a probe into your intent, your patience, your depth. The undecided woman may simply be mapping your shadow before revealing her own. The weaponization of vulnerability. She cries, you crumble. But the tears may not be weakness. They may be saltwater rituals of control, calculated or unconscious. To dismiss them is naive. To fear them is wise. The need for validation. Is this a flaw or a mirror of your own? Her hunger for recognition reflects a deeper truth. We all crave to be seen. She merely has the courage to demand it. The discomfort with confrontation. Avoidance is not cowardice, it is strategy. Silence can be the most potent resistance. The quiet woman may be louder than you think. Emotional memory she does not forget. Where you see the past as gone, she sees it as alive. Wounds are not erased, they are archived. This is not fragility, it is psychic accounting. Dependency in disguise. She leans on you, yes, but look again. Is she supporting herself through you, or guiding you to a place of usefulness? Sometimes control looks like surrender, the mask of modesty. She downplays her strength so you can play the hero, but do not mistake that for submission. She writes the script and lets you believe you're the author. Fear of abandonment. This fear is ancient, older than language, but from it grows a cunning ability to bond, to bind, to build alliances deeper than logic can grasp. Self-sacrifice as leverage. She gives and gives and gives until the debt is spiritual. You will owe her and you won't know why. That is not weakness. That is power disguised as martyrdom. On the invisibility game, perhaps her greatest strength is the ability to disappear, to become so unseen that she moves beneath your awareness, shaping outcomes without taking credit. The invisible hand is often hers. She pauses. She hesitates. Her gaze flits to the side. Their question is posed and silence follows, not immediate refusal nor eager assent, but the in-between. You wait, perhaps impatiently, perhaps smugly, thinking you've won a step by pressing her into uncertainty. But what if you are wrong? What if that pause is not confusion, but calculation? To the untrained eye, indecision looks like weakness. It suggests a lack of will, a fractured self. But beneath the surface of this apparent delay lies a deeper force at work. The ancient feminine impulse to sense, to test, to weigh. What appears as hesitation may be the sharpening of perception, the summoning of intuition, a power that does not rush to speak, but waits until the unseen has spoken first. She is not looking for the right answer. She is watching you answer yourself. This is no performance. It is instinct. Centuries of navigating the labyrinth of masculine certainty have taught her the value of ambiguity. Where men often race to conclusions, mistaking speed for clarity, the feminine archetype moves through shadows, through subtleties, allowing the psyche to speak in symbols and nuance. Indecision becomes a veil, and behind that veil, she observes, she listens not only to your words, but to your omissions, not only to what you declare, but to how you falter. This ambiguity can be maddening. It threatens the ego, which seeks control through definition. But she resists definition. She resists being pinned down. In her world, meaning is fluid, layered, evolving. A yes today may become a no tomorrow, not out of deceit, but because her truth has shifted with the tide of feeling, with the subtle realignment of inner forces. And yet, this is not fickleness. It is alignment with a different rhythm, one that is lunar, cyclical, organic. You may call her indecisive, but she is merely unconvinced that your question is real enough to answer. For to answer is to give herself. To answer is to commit psychic energy. And why would she offer herself to a premise she suspects is flawed? This moment, this pause, is also a test. Not always conscious, not always intentional, but a test nonetheless. She watches how you handle her ambiguity. Do you press? Do you become anxious? Do you grow resentful of her slowness, her silence, her refusal to gratify your urgency? If so, you reveal your own need to dominate. You reveal your discomfort with the feminine mystery. And that tells her everything. The illusion of indecision is therefore a kind of mirror. In her hesitation, you meet yourself. You see what you do not tolerate. You see what you cannot control. And in that seeing, your mask slips, revealing whether you are strong enough to stand in uncertainty, or whether your desire for clarity is merely a fear of the unknown. But there is more. Indecision also protects her. It allows her to move like water, to avoid being fixed, categorized, reduced. It is an armor that appears as softness. It buys time. It invites disclosure. When she does not choose, others rush to fill the silence. They reveal themselves. They mistake her quiet for emptiness and spill their truths into it. She listens. She learns. And she stores everything. What you call her weakness may be your transparency. In the ancient world, the oracle never answered plainly. Her words were riddles, her tone dreamlike. Kings traveled across deserts to hear her ambiguity and built empires on what she might have meant. This is not new. The feminine has always known the value of withholding. The illusion of indecision is not indecision at all. It is the wisdom of the hidden, the movement of shadow, the dance of the deep unconscious made flesh. It is the feminine refusing to be rushed into the masculine's architecture of urgency. She cries and something inside you stirs, confusion, discomfort, perhaps even guilt. Her voice cracks and your chest tightens. Her hands tremble and suddenly the air shifts. You were certain a moment ago about your argument, your position, your control, but now you hesitate. You reach toward her not from dominance, but from some ancient compulsion to protect, to soothe, to fix. But who now holds the power? In the modern psyche, vulnerability is often confused with helplessness. Especially in women, it is framed as a flaw, a crack in composure, a failing of strength. Yet beneath this surface narrative lies an older story, one where vulnerability is not weakness at all, but an alchemical force that draws out, reveals, and transforms. And sometimes it controls. To show one's wounds is a form of exposure, but exposure is not surrender. In fact, it may be strategy, sometimes conscious, sometimes not. The tears, the silence, the trembling breath. These gestures operate in a space beyond language. They bypass logic. They pull you into the realm of feeling, where your defenses falter, where your sword becomes useless against her open chest. You cannot fight someone who bleeds in front of you. This is where the real power lies, not in aggression, but in evoking your own shadow. Her pain touches something in you that you haven't named, the protector, the guilty, the shamed boy who was taught to silence his own feelings. Her vulnerability awakens your own, and suddenly she has entered your psychic structure, not through force but through invitation. And yet, there is danger here, for not all softness is innocent. There are masks made of tears. There are manipulations wrapped in whispers. Just as a sword can be concealed in velvet, power can be disguised as fragility. The feminine archetype, shaped across centuries of exclusion and physical vulnerability, has learned the art of survival not through confrontation, but through influence. Vulnerability becomes a tool, a subtle, complex force that reshapes the room without ever raising its voice. She does not yell. She wilts. And in that gesture, she brings you to your knees. This is not inherently malicious. It is adaptive. A woman stripped of physical power must evolve psychic weapons. In a world where strength is often measured in volume and control, her softness becomes subversive. Her openness becomes armor. Her emotional expression, when wielded with awareness, is not only release, it is redirection. She changes the direction of power simply by receiving it, absorbing it, reflecting it back magnified through the mirror of emotion. You believe you are protecting her. You believe you are yielding out of nobility. But what if you are yielding because she has drawn you into a terrain where your weapons no longer work? What if your logic has collapsed under the weight of her feeling? What if she is leading you, not following you? This phenomenon cannot be easily dissected. That is its nature. It belongs to the irrational, the symbolic, the shadow. Vulnerability in this form defies masculine order. It slips between categories, eludes systems, resists control, and that is precisely why it is powerful. There is a kind of terror in witnessing her breakdown, not because she is weak, but because her openness demands something from you, attention, transformation, surrender. It disarms you, not through violence, but through resonance. Her tears are a language your bones remember. Her trembling body is an image etched into your ancestral memory, the mother, the maiden, the mourner, all speaking at once, all pulling you into their orbit. And if you resist, she may retreat, collapse further, or escalate the softness until you fracture. Because whether she knows it or not, her vulnerability is not merely an expression, it is a magnetic field. It commands the room, rearranges dynamics, and pulls authority downward like gravity. To weep is not to yield. It is to shift the axis of power from the rational to the emotional, from the visible to the hidden, from the sword to the wound. She asks, "Do I look good in this?" She says, "I don't know if I did it right." She waits for your reaction, watches your face as you speak, listens not just to what you say, but to what you don't say. You interpret this as insecurity, a weakness, perhaps even an emotional burden. You think, why does she need so much reassurance? Why can't she just know her own worth? But pause. What you are witnessing is not simply the surface behavior of a needy woman. It is an archetypal echo centuries deep. This so-called need for validation is not always a flaw in her confidence. It is a psychic call for mirroring, for reflection, from a world that has historically refused to see her clearly. To understand this dynamic, you must enter the mythic space of the psyche, where the ego seeks its sense of reality through the gaze of the other. Every self, male or female, forms in relation to how it is seen. The child knows it exists because the mother's eyes confirm it. Later we all seek those same confirming eyes in lovers, in friends, in society. But for the feminine psyche, especially in cultures that distort, sexualize, or diminish it, the need to be truly seen becomes intensified. It's not a hunger for compliments, it's a longing for reflection, for recognition beyond utility. She may ask, "Am I good enough?" But beneath that question is a more profound plea. Do I exist in your world as something more than a function? The need for validation is not simply about appearance or performance. It is about anchoring identity in a world where roles have too often been imposed rather than chosen. She does not seek your approval. She seeks evidence that her presence registers in your internal landscape, that you are not merely reacting to her body, her behavior, or her utility, but to her being. Yet there's another layer. Sometimes this need is exaggerated, made into performance, ritualized, compulsive, and that is when it becomes strategic. In a relationship, repeated validation seeking can begin to define power. She asks, you respond. The cycle creates dependency, but also control. She can now modulate your attention, determine your emotional labor, and assess your willingness to serve her psychic needs. You may believe you're in charge because she asks you to confirm her worth. But every time you do, your role in the exchange becomes clearer. You are now the mirror, not the subject. And in that you are being used not maliciously, but archetypally as a tool of self-regulation. Still, projection runs both ways. You may perceive her need for validation as weakness, but ask yourself, why does it disturb you? Perhaps because it reflects your own unacknowledged hunger to be seen, to be praised, to be confirmed as valuable, not through achievement, but simply through being. Her visible need may irritate you because it reveals your invisible one. Her request for affirmation exposes your own silent craving for recognition, a need you've buried beneath competence, control, or self-sufficiency. She says, "What do you think of me?" You scoff, retreat into stoicism, maybe accuse her of neediness, but in truth you fear the question, because it demands presence, because it threatens your illusion of emotional independence, because it pierces through your persona and touches the part of you that, too, is still waiting to be seen by someone, anyone, completely. This is the trap and the truth of validation. It binds two people in a ritual of mutual reflection. If unconscious, it becomes a game of emotional supply. One gives, the other takes endlessly. But when understood, it becomes a gateway to intimacy, the courage to look into another and say, "You are real to me. You exist." For her, validation is not weakness. It is a coded request for presence, attention, and psychic participation. It is not always a flaw in her. It may be a flaw in the emotional poverty of the space around her. She avoids the argument. She walks away mid-sentence. She says it's fine when clearly it's not. You press her, wanting clarity, resolution, a clean line in the sand, but she offers mist instead. She deflects. She delays. She disappears behind silence or softness. You may interpret this as cowardice, a failure to stand up for herself, a feminine inability to handle direct conflict. But what if what you see as discomfort is not fear but strategy? The feminine psyche, shaped not in the field of open combat but in the labyrinth of relationships, has developed a different language of resistance. Confrontation, especially in its overt, aggressive or verbalized masculine form, is not her native ground. It is not that she cannot fight. It is that she rarely fights the way you expect. Her power does not reside in the blow, but in the withdrawal, not in the noise but in the silence that follows it. To confront directly is to expose oneself, to stand naked in the center of fire. But to her, exposure is already a familiar condition. The feminine has lived for centuries in a world where being seen often meant being judged, punished, or misunderstood. In such a world, confrontation becomes dangerous, not just socially but psychically. So instead of clashing swords, she learns how to sidestep the blade entirely. Her silence may be misread as submission, but look closely. In that quiet, there is a refusal, not of truth, but of your framework. She is not engaging on your terms because your terms are built on control, on conquest, on the illusion that shouting the truth is the same as being heard. But she does not equate volume with strength. Her power is older, more circular, more difficult to pin down. Avoidance then becomes a psychological maneuver, not always intentional but deeply rooted. It allows her to retreat, to gather data, to absorb the temperature of the emotional field. While you demand answers and declarations, she listens, sometimes too much, sometimes to her own detriment. She digests not only what is said, but the tone, the timing, the tension under the words. What you call evasion may actually be discernment. But yes, there is danger here. There are moments when this discomfort with confrontation becomes self-erasure, when she remains quiet not because she is choosing silence, but because she has been trained to fear the cost of speech. She has learned that to speak too directly is to risk being labeled irrational, dramatic, unstable. And so she absorbs. She internalizes. She lets the storm rage inside her, where no one can argue with it, and that internalization becomes its own kind of war. What is not expressed outwardly turns inward. Resentment festers beneath politeness. Rage curls beneath the smile. This is the cost of emotional diplomacy. She avoids the fire, but it still burns. Only now it burns from within. But avoidance is not the whole picture. There are other ways she confronts, through implication, through metaphor, through tone, through changes in rhythm, in the rituals of closeness. You may notice she touches you less. She answers with shorter words. She praises you less frequently. These are not accidents. They are signals. This is confrontation in her language. She withdraws energy, not affection. She confronts not with volume, but with absence. This form of engagement can be maddening to the direct psyche, but her discomfort with confrontation is not dysfunction. It is evolution. In a world where she has historically lost battles fought in plain sight, she has learned to fight in shadow, to negotiate through emotional temperature, to resist not through defiance but through delay. This isn't about fear, it's about self-preservation. It's about navigating a world that often penalizes directness in women, especially when it comes wrapped in emotion. Her hesitation to confront does not mean she does not feel anger or injustice. It means she has learned that her words are often heard only when they arrive softened, disguised, or delayed. You've forgotten what you said 3 weeks ago, perhaps even 3 hours ago. You moved on. The conversation ended, the issue resolved, at least in your mind. But she remembers, not just the words, but the tone, the look in your eye, the weight of the silence that followed. She remembers the shape of the moment, the emotional residue it left behind, and not in the linear, factual sense that you might be used to, but in a looping, layered way. You call it holding a grudge. She calls it remembering how something made her feel. This is not sentimentality. It is structure. The feminine psyche does not store time as a sequence of events, but as a spiral of impressions. Each emotional experience is not isolated. It echoes, it overlaps. When she brings up an old wound, it isn't because she is stuck in the past. It's because the past is not dead inside her. It breathes. It lives just beneath the surface of the present, shaping how she moves, how she trusts, how she touches. She may smile today, but the emotional echo of yesterday remains. Not to sabotage the moment, but to preserve a kind of internal continuity. Where you may seek to sever the past and declare a clean slate, she carries the past like a woven garment, threaded through with moments, meanings, and moods. This is not fragility. This is intelligence. An intelligence that does not discard emotional data simply because time has passed. You might feel as though she brings things up out of nowhere. But in her reality, nothing comes from nowhere. Every moment contains layers. Her anger today may carry the scent of past betrayals. Her silence may be stitched with the memory of earlier dismissals. When she cries, it is rarely for just one thing. Her emotions do not live in compartments. They flood, they echo, they return. This depth of emotional recall is not about keeping score. It is about keeping meaning intact. It's not that she hasn't forgiven. It's that she hasn't forgotten the effect. And why would she? Emotional memory is the compass she uses to navigate relationship. It tells her where danger once lived, where promises were broken, where connection was real, and where it was only performed. She stores this not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. She cannot afford to forget what shaped her, what taught her how far to trust. Even her love is shaped by memory, not in the form of obligation, but through the deep grooves of accumulated feeling. Her attachment to you may be rooted, not just in who you are today, but in all the moments you held her through chaos, all the small kindnesses you've long since forgotten. She remembers those too. Not like facts in a file, but like music. They return when certain notes are struck. One gesture, one word, one moment of presence, and suddenly the entire emotional archive opens again. This is why apologies that come without emotional alignment fall flat. You say, "I already said I'm sorry," but she does not need the word, she needs the frequency. She needs to feel that you've stepped into the emotional truth of what occurred, not just acknowledged it intellectually. Because emotional memory is not healed through logic. It is healed through resonance, presence, and repetition of safety. You may call this emotionality excessive. You may even envy the simplicity of your own forgetfulness. But that simplicity is not superiority. It is difference. You seek to resolve and move forward. She seeks to integrate, to understand, to metabolize the experience completely. She is not collecting grievances. She is collecting truths, trying to stitch together a coherent emotional reality in a world that often asks her to deny her own perception. Her memory is not a ledger. It is a landscape. One where every emotional imprint, even the faintest one, becomes part of the terrain she must walk again and again in order to know where she is.